Stride Audio Show.
Presented by Speak English with Us.
Your coworker just finished presenting, the room goes quiet, and you say, "Wow, that's really good." They smile. The conversation dies, and you're left thinking, did that even land?
That feeling is so specific you meant it, but it came out sounding like a grade on a report card.
This is English Stride, and today we're talking about something most English classes completely skip how to make your compliments actually mean something.
This is a B1 level episode, perfect for intermediate learners. And if you're a beginner, stay with us. You'll pick up a lot just by listening.
Here's what we discovered making this episode. There's actually a concept in linguistics called the specificity effect. The more specific your praise, the more genuine it feels. And we're going to break that down into 3 moves you can use today.
And by the end, you'll never have to reach for amazing again when your brain goes completely blank.
Quick question before we dive in: when someone does something impressive and you want to compliment them, which one do you reach for first? A, that's awesome. B, I really liked how you did that. Drop A or B right now.
I already know most people are typing A because B feels like it takes more effort.
And that's exactly the gap we're closing today. Effort isn't the problem, it's knowing the pattern. Once you have it, it's just as fast.
We've got 5 expressions in today's word tour that are going to completely change how you give compliments. Stay until the end for that.
And later, we'll give you one tiny shift that makes any compliment go from forgettable to something that actually sticks with the other person.
I'm guessing you're listening to this on your commute right now. Or maybe you're doing dishes. Either way, you're about to get a lot better at something people notice immediately.
Because here's the thing. The words you use to praise someone tell them how closely you were actually paying attention. And people remember that.
So let's get into it. First, why does generic praise feel so hollow, even when you mean every word of it? Okay, I have to confess something. Last week, a friend showed me a painting she'd been working on for 2 months. 2 months. And what did I say?
Let me guess. Wow, that's really cool.
That's amazing. That's it. That's all I had. She smiled, said thanks, and then just moved on. And I could tell it didn't land. It felt like I'd handed her a participation trophy.
And the worst part is, you genuinely meant it. You weren't being fake. But the words didn't carry the weight of what you actually felt.
Exactly. And that's the gap, right? Between what's happening inside and what actually comes out.
This is where the specificity effect comes in. In linguistics, there's solid research showing that specific praise doesn't just feel nicer, it actually signals to the other person that you are paying real attention. It's the difference between "I see you" and "I see this one thing you did."
So it's not about being more poetic. It's about being more precise.
Right. And here's the thing, when something genuinely resonates with you, your brain already noticed a specific detail. You just haven't trained yourself to say it out loud yet.
Which is exactly why we're here. Okay, so let's try something. I want to do a role play. I'll be the coworker who just finished presenting. You respond the old way first.
Deal. Go ahead.
So, yeah, that's the full proposal. I know it's a lot, but I think it could really work. What do you think?
Yeah, that was really good. Nice job.
See, even saying it feels hollow. There's nowhere for the conversation to go after that.
Hold on, I want to use this as our role play moment, because this is exactly where most people freeze. You just finished presenting, Leo. The silence stretches. I'm practically sweating trying to find the right words under pressure, and my instinct is to say, yeah, that was really good.
And that's the moment. That's the fork in the road.
So here's what's going wrong. Really good is a verdict. It's a score. It doesn't tell the other person what stood out, what landed, what made you think. It's the linguistic equivalent of a thumbs up emoji.
Ouch, but accurate.
Now let me show you the upgrade. Same situation. Leo, go again.
So yeah, that's the full proposal. I know it's a lot, but I think it could really work. What do you think?
I really liked how you structured the opening. You pulled off something I always struggle with, which is making the problem feel urgent without being dramatic. That part was spot on.
Okay, that felt completely different. I actually want to keep talking now.
And notice what happened there. I didn't use a single fancy word. I just named one specific thing, the structure of the opening, and then connected it to something real. My own experience.
So the formula is specific detail plus personal reaction.
Exactly. And that second part is what most people skip. The personal reaction is what makes it genuine. It tells the other person, your work didn't just exist in a vacuum, it actually did something to me.
It's like the difference between a food critic saying, this dish is good, versus the way the acidity cuts through the richness here. I didn't expect that, and it completely changed how I tasted the whole thing.
That's a very specific example, Leo.
I was hungry when I wrote my notes, but the point stands specificity is what makes something resonate with the other person. It shows you were actually there, actually present.
And here's what's interesting, this works in every context, not just work presentations, your friend's new haircut, a stranger who held the door open in a really thoughtful way, someone who handled a difficult situation and you want them to know it didn't go unnoticed.
The pattern is the same every time. Find the one thing that genuinely stood out to you, say that thing, then add what it made you feel or think.
And if you're thinking, but what if nothing specific comes to mind? That's actually useful information. It means you weren't fully present, which is a whole other episode.
Saving that one for later, but for now, there's actually a phrase for that feeling when a compliment lands perfectly, when it's not just nice to hear, but it actually means something. We'll break it down in the word tour later.
So we've got the formula specific detail plus personal reaction. Let's talk about how to actually build this habit. Because knowing the pattern is one thing, using it in real time, when your brain is under social pressure, is another.
I've tried this, and honestly, the first few times it felt awkward, like I was overthinking a compliment.
That's such a normal reaction. And here's the reframe. You're not overthinking it. You're just slowing down a reflex that was never properly trained in the first place.
But wait, I want to push back on something here, because I think there's a real risk with this approach.
Go ahead.
If I'm standing there trying to find the right specific detail to mention, doesn't that make the whole thing feel calculated? Like I'm constructing a compliment instead of just giving one? At some point, doesn't that stop being genuine?
That's a fair challenge. But I think you're conflating two different things, being intentional and being fake. A surgeon is intentional about every cut. That doesn't make the surgery less real.
But a compliment isn't surgery. It's supposed to be spontaneous. The moment you start analyzing it, you lose the warmth.
Hold on, spontaneous doesn't mean unthoughtful. When something genuinely resonates with you, the specific detail is already there in your head. You noticed it. You just haven't practiced saying it out loud. That's not calculation. That's just articulation.
Okay. But what about people who aren't naturally observant? Not everyone notices specific details in the moment. So if you're telling someone, find the specific thing that stood out, what if nothing stood out? Are they just supposed to make something up?
That's actually the most honest version of this question, and my answer is, if nothing genuinely stood out, then don't force a specific compliment. A simple, warm acknowledgement is still better than a fabricated detail. But here's what I've found. Most of the time, something did stand out. People just dismiss it because it feels too small to mention.
What do you mean, too small?
Like your friend shows you a painting, and you notice the way she used shadow in one corner. Your brain goes, that's probably too nerdy to say out loud, so you default to amazing. But that shadow detail, that's exactly what she wants to hear, because it means you actually looked.
Okay, I'll give you that one. But here's my third pushback, and I think this one's harder to answer.
Let's hear it.
Cultural context. In a lot of cultures, and for a lot of English learners, specifically being too specific in a compliment can actually feel intrusive. Like you're analyzing someone instead of appreciating them. I really liked how you structured your opening might land as warm in one context and weirdly clinical in another. Isn't this advice too Western-centric?
That's a really sharp point, and I don't want to dismiss it. You're right that delivery matters enormously across cultures. But here's where I'd push back. This specificity effect isn't about being analytical. It's about being present. And presence reads as warmth in almost every cultural context I'm aware of.
But the way you express that presence is culturally coded. I really liked how you structured that. Is a very direct, very Western framing. In other contexts, you might express the same presence through a question. How did you decide to open it that way, rather than a statement?
That's actually a brilliant reframe. And you're right, the principle is universal, but the delivery can flex. A question that shows you notice something specific is just as powerful as a statement, maybe more powerful in some contexts, because it invites the other person to keep talking.
So the real move isn't say this specific sentence. It's show the other person that you were paying attention. And there are multiple ways to do that depending on who you're talking to.
Exactly. And that's actually the third upgrade we wanted to share today. Move 1, replace the vague adjective with a specific detail. Move 2, add your personal reaction. Move 3, if a statement feels too direct, turn it into a question that proves you were listening.
So instead of that was spot on, you could say, how did you decide to structure it that way? And the other person immediately knows you were paying attention to the structure.
And that question does something a compliment can't always do. It pulls off a full conversation. The other person gets to talk about their process, their thinking, their choices. You've given them something way more valuable than a thumbs up.
It's like the compliment opens a door, but the question walks through it with them.
I'm stealing that line.
Please do. Okay, so to land this section, the goal isn't to perform appreciation. It's to communicate it accurately. And accuracy requires some specificity, some personal connection, and sometimes a question instead of a verdict.
And if you're worried it'll feel unnatural, at first it will. For about 3 conversations, then it becomes the reflex, and the old way starts to feel like the awkward one.
If you want to like and subscribe, now's a great time. It genuinely helps us keep making episodes like this one.
And stay with us, because up next, we're going into the word tour, where we break down the 5 expressions from today that you can pull off in any of these situations. So we've established the problem. Generic praise feels hollow. But here's where I want to push back on something, because I think the fix sounds easier than it actually is.
What do you mean?
I've been practicing this. Genuinely. And my honest experience is, in the moment when someone's looking at you waiting for a reaction, your brain doesn't automatically reach for the specific detail. It reaches for the safe word. Amazing. Awesome. It's almost a reflex.
Right, because the safe word is low risk. If you say something specific and you get it wrong, if you highlight the wrong thing, it can feel worse than saying nothing specific at all.
Wait, that's actually a really good point. So you're saying specificity has a risk attached to it?
I think it does. If I say, I loved how you structured the opening, and the person thinks that was actually the weakest part, now we've got an awkward moment.
But hold on. I'd argue that's still better than the alternative. At least you were paying attention. At least you tried to engage with the actual work. That effort is visible, even if the detail wasn't spot on.
I'm not sure I buy that. There's a version of specific praise that can feel presumptuous, like you're telling someone what was good about their own work when they know it better than you do.
Okay, but that's a framing issue, not a specificity issue. There's a difference between this part was the best part as a verdict versus this part is what resonated with me personally. One is a judgment, the other is a reaction, and reactions can't be wrong.
That's actually a meaningful distinction.
Right? Because I really liked how you opened with the problem before the solution. It made me want to keep reading. Is not a grade. It's just honest. It's genuine. You're not claiming authority over their work. You're just reporting your experience of it.
But what if you genuinely don't have a specific reaction? What if something was good but nothing particularly stood out? Are you supposed to manufacture a detail just to sound more thoughtful?
No. And I think that's actually the most honest version of this conversation. If nothing stood out, you can still be specific about the overall effect. This genuinely made me think differently about how I approach this, is specific without requiring you to dissect the craft.
So the specificity doesn't have to be about the mechanics. It can be about the impact.
Exactly. And that's actually easier because you always have access to your own reaction. You don't need to be an expert in what they did. You just need to be honest about what it did to you.
Okay. But here's my last pushback, and I think this one's real. What about cultural context? In some environments, being too specific with praise can feel overly intense, like you're making a big deal out of something the other person wants to stay casual about.
That's fair. And I think the answer there is calibration, not abandonment. You don't have to deliver a full analysis every time someone does something well. But even in casual contexts, one specific word does more than 3 generic ones. That was spot on lands differently than that was great. Same register, completely different weight.
So it's not about turning every compliment into a TED Talk.
Exactly. It's about finding the one true thing and saying that, just that. You don't need to pull off a whole speech. One real detail, delivered simply, is enough to make someone feel genuinely seen.
And I think that's the shift. It's not about being more eloquent. It's about being more present. If you were actually paying attention, the specific detail is already there. You just have to trust it enough to say it out loud.
And the more you practice saying it, the faster it comes. It stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like just how you talk.
Which is the whole point of English Stride, honestly. Not memorizing phrases. Building instincts.
So, here's the one thing to take away from this act. Stop editing your reaction before it comes out. The specific detail your brain noticed, that's the compliment. Say that.
And if your brain noticed nothing, maybe put the phone down next time someone's presenting.
We'll let that one land. Coming up, our word tour. 5 expressions from today that are going to make your English feel sharper, more natural, and a lot more you. Okay, word tour time, and I want to start with the one that's actually the foundation of everything we talked about today. Genuine.
We used this one early on. When I said my compliment to my friend about her painting it was genuine, I meant it, but the words didn't carry that.
Right. And that's the whole tension. Genuine means real and sincere, not polite for the sake of it, not performed. When something is genuine, there's no gap between what you feel and what you say. That was a genuine compliment means it came from a real place, not from social obligation.
The opposite of genuine is, well, hollow, which is exactly what "that's great" sounds like after you've said it 50 times.
And here's how it shows up in real conversation. You might say, I want to be genuine here, not just polite, before you give feedback. It signals that what's coming next is actually true.
Which leads perfectly into standout, because genuine praise almost always points to something that stood out.
Yes, Stand out means to be noticeably different or better than everything else around it. It's not just good, it's the thing that catches your eye or your ear or your attention when everything else blurs together.
Like in that role play earlier when I said I really liked how you structured the opening, what I was really saying was that part stood out to me. Everything else was solid, but that one thing made me stop.
Exactly. And you can use it directly, too. That opening really stood out. Simple, specific, and it tells the person exactly what landed. It's not a vague compliment. It's a location. You're pointing at something.
Now spot on is one I want to spend a second on because it's so useful and so underused by non-native speakers.
It's one of my favorites. Spot on means exactly right or perfectly done. Not almost right, not pretty good. Exactly right.
When Maya said in the role play, that part was spot on. She wasn't just saying it was good. She was saying it hit the target precisely. There's a confidence in that phrase that good just doesn't have.
And it works in so many contexts. Your timing was spot on. That analogy was spot on. The tone of that email was spot on. It's clean, it's native, and it lands every time.
Okay, resonate with. This one came up when we were talking about why specific praise works better because it actually resonates with the person.
To resonate with someone means to feel meaningful or relatable to them. Like something struck a chord. When you say, that really resonated with me, you're saying, this didn't just pass through my ears. It connected to something I already know, or feel, or believe.
And in the context of compliments, it's powerful because it shifts the focus from the work to the effect. That story really resonated with me is more intimate than that was a great story. You're letting the person know their work reached you.
It's the difference between a thumbs up and a hand on the heart.
That actually reminds me of my favorite phrase from your story earlier when we were talking about navigating those difficult moments. Pull off.
Pull off is such a satisfying one. It means to successfully do something that seemed difficult, something that could have gone wrong but didn't. When you pull something off, there's an element of against the odds.
Like when I said in the role play, you pulled off something I always struggle with. I wasn't just saying you did it. I was saying you did something hard, and it worked.
And that's what makes it such a strong compliment word. It acknowledges the difficulty. It says, I noticed this wasn't easy, and you did it anyway. That's a completely different message than nice job.
So if you want to upgrade a compliment, pull off is one of the fastest ways to add weight. You really pulled off that presentation hits differently than your presentation was good.
5 words. Genuine. Stand out. Spot on. Resonate with. Pull off. Each one does something that great and amazing. Simply can't they point at something real? So, today's big idea was simple. If your compliment sounds generic, it usually lands like a checkbox. If it sounds specific, it feels alive.
And the shift isn't complicated. Notice one detail, name it, then add your real reaction. That's how you move from polite to genuine.
A good practice this week is to pause for 2 seconds before you compliment someone. Ask yourself, what actually stood out? What was spot on? What did it make me think about?
And if your brain goes blank, don't panic. Use the impact first. Say, that really resonated with me, or you really pulled off something difficult. Then you can build from there.
My own rule is tiny but useful. I try to banish my first automatic word. If great jumps out, I stop and look for the reason behind it. That one habit changed how I sound in real conversations.
Mine is even simpler. I imagine I'm talking to a real person, not trying to win a vocabulary contest. That usually knocks out the fake tone pretty fast.
And remember, this isn't about sounding fancy, it's about sounding present. People can feel when you notice something real.
Before you go, we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, what's one compliment you've wanted to say but didn't know how to make it sound more natural?
We read every single comment. Try one of today's phrases in your next real conversation and see how it changes the moment.
Thanks for listening, and in our next episode, we'll keep building those small English moves that make your speech sound more human.
See you next time.